Hunt Showdown has an economy problem, but honestly, I don't think money is the real problem here. The real issue is that money at some point stops feeling relevant. And the weird part is, every solution sounds smart at first, until you start thinking about what it would actually do to the game. And later in this video, I can guarantee one thing. You will think you found the perfect solution, and then you will realize why it would destroy something else in the game instead. When you first start playing Hunt Showdown, the economy feels great. Every weapon purchase feels important, and every death feels expensive. You carefully think about which loadout you can afford. You hesitate before buying stronger weapons, because losing them feels painful. And honestly, that pressure is one of Hunt's strongest early game mechanics. The economy creates tension without actually forcing tension. You naturally become more careful because the game convinces you that surviving actually matters. But the longer you play Hunt, the more this illusion disappears. At some point, you stop seeing Hunt dollars as an actual resource. They become background noise instead. You learn how to consistently make money. You understand extraction better. And eventually, you start realizing that losing an expensive loadout doesn't really hurt you. Right now, I sit at around 80,000 Hunt dollars. And I generally do not care if I lose expensive gear. I can die 5 matches in a row and financially, nothing really changes for me. And that's where the real problem starts. Because Hunt's economy feels incredibly deep at the beginning, but eventually becomes completely irrelevant once players fully understand the system. And that creates a massive balancing issue later on, because expensive weapons are balanced through price. But price only matters if money itself does. And in high MMR, that often completely disappears. Weapons like the Mosin or Dolch are supposed to feel premium. They are expensive because the game wants them to feel valuable. The economy is supposed to naturally limit how often these weapons appear in a match. But let's be honest here. That's not what really happens. Instead, expensive loadouts become standard equipment for high MMR players. Mosin and Dolch stop feeling like a risky investment and start feeling like default competitive setups. And that in turn creates a weird contradiction. The players who are best at abusing stronger loadouts are also the players that are least affected by its cost. And that just completely breaks the intended balancing structure. Because if a strong weapon is supposed to be balanced through economy, but skilled players ignore the economy, then the balancing factor completely stops existing. And I think that's the point where Hunt's economy quietly falls apart. Not because newer players struggle with money, but because experienced players at some point stop interacting with the system entirely. And now comes the frustrating part. Fixing this problem sounds easy at first, until you actually start analyzing the consequences. The first solution sounds incredibly obvious. Simply reduce the amount of money players can earn and make expensive loadouts riskier again. Force people to care about Hunt dollars. At first glance, this sounds like the perfect fix. If money stopped mattering, then make money harder to obtain again. Problem solved.
好吧，但是难道不是新玩家才会遇到的问题吗？那些已经很有钱的玩家肯定不会受到任何影响。
And that's exactly the issue. Experienced players already know how to survive economically. Newer and casual players don't. And Hunt Showdown already feels punishing enough for those players. And the moment repeated losses remove your favorite loadout, frustration rises extremely fast. And I honestly think this would hurt Hunt Showdown a lot. Because one of Hunt Showdown's biggest strengths is loadout freedom. People love experimenting with weapons. People love stupid meme loadouts. Me included. And people also love expensive loadouts because they look cool. The moment economy starts restricting that freedom too aggressively, the game just simply stops feeling rewarding. And that's why I personally think that harsher economy doesn't really fix the problem here. The next solution also sounds reasonable at first. If expensive weapons dominate high MMR, then simply just nerf them. Make the Mosin weaker. Reduce the strength of the Dolch. Reduce the fire rate of the Crown and King, or Auto 5 for your newer players here. Flatten the gap between premium and budget weapons.
Oh, wait a second, but cheap weapons are already dangerous. Romero can still one-shot people, so wouldn't nerfing expensive weapons just flatten the sandbox, no?
And that's exactly the problem. The more I thought about this solution, the less I liked it. Because Hunt Showdown already has a very strong weapon balancing system. Cheap weapons can still be dangerous. And that's why Hunt Showdown feels so satisfying compared to other extraction shooters. The game does not completely break down into who has better gear. Player decisions matter, aim decisions matter, and positioning also matters. And honestly, I think destroying that weapon balance just to compensate for economy problems would be a terrible trade. Premium weapons should feel powerful, the Mosin should feel dangerous, and the Dolch should feel dangerous at close range. That identity is incredibly important for Hunt's sandbox. And let's be honest here, the real issue isn't that these weapons are too strong. The problem is that experienced players at some point stop caring about the economically downsides. And that just in turn creates a very awkward balancing problem. Now let's get to the smartest sounding solution here. Instead of balancing loadouts through money, you balance them through points. Every weapon, tool or consumable has a value attached to it. Players can only bring loadouts to a specific point limit. So expensive combinations naturally cause trade-offs. And honestly, I actually like this idea in theory, because good economies are fundamentally about making meaningful decisions. And a point system actually creates that decision.
But wouldn't people instantly optimize the best point combinations? Like, the community would solve the system almost entirely, yeah?
Exactly. And that's why this solution becomes dangerous very quickly. Because players optimize everything. The community would instantly solve the best points combination possible. Videos would appear showcasing the strongest point optimization. Website would calculate the most efficient builds. And at some point, the system stops feeling immersive. You stop building cool cowboy loadouts and somehow start becoming a mathematician instead. So you don't really remove optimization, you simply just swap out a money economy with a point economy. And honestly, I don't think that's the better choice. Now, let's get to the final solution I found in the comment section of one of my recent videos. Scale the economy through MMR. Higher MMR players pay more for their equipment, and lower MMR people get cheaper access to loadouts. On paper, this sounds incredibly fair. The stronger players who don't really care about the economy get pressured more by the system by having to spend more on their loadouts. And that in turn sounds more balanced.
But wouldn't people just intentionally derank then? If lower MMR becomes financially better, people would abuse that immediately.
And that's exactly why this solution completely falls apart. And to be honest, Hunt Showdown already has enough problems when it comes to the MMR system. The last thing this game needs is another reason for players to manipulate MMR. Because now your rank not only affects matchmaking, but also your economy. And suddenly MMR is not really a representation of your skill anymore, but instead a resource players manage strategically. And that in turn creates horrible incentives. So now you didn't just fail to fix the economy, you accidentally made Hunt's MMR system way worse than it already is. And that's the point where you start realizing how weird this problem actually is. Because every logical fix creates a big problem somewhere else. And I think that is the core issue here. Hunt Showdown's economy works beautifully during the learning phase, but it slowly stops scaling with player understanding. The better players become, the less meaningful economic decisions actually matter. And once loadouts stop feeling risky, the balancing structure silently collapses. Not immediately, but slowly. And that's what makes this issue so difficult to solve, because Hunt Showdown doesn't need an economy that punishes players harder. It needs an economy that stays meaningful without removing freedom. And honestly, I genuinely don't know how to solve this problem. Usually when I make these videos, I try ending with a clean answer. However, to be completely honest here, this time I can't. I can explain the problem. I can explain why obvious fixes fail, but I genuinely don't know the perfect solution here. So this is actually the first time where I need your guys' help. How would you fix Hunt's economy without destroying loadout freedom? Because I honestly think that's the impossible part here. And by the way, if you enjoy short, high-density analysis like this one, focus on why Hunt systems feel good at first, but fall apart later. That's exactly what this channel does. Subscribing makes sense.